Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. We're going to give this just another moment for participants to join and have people come on in into the room. And we'll begin in about a minute or two. While we wait, um, we would love to hear where you're from, where you're tuning in from. If you want to use the chat function, let us know your name and where you're tuning in from, what state, what town.
That's great. Thanks everybody for jumping in there. It's great to see who you are and where you're coming from. We really appreciate it. And very excited to be able to have this conversation with you today. So great.
Yeah. And while we do that, I think we can go ahead and get started. Again, welcome. Thank you all so much for making the time to be here with us today. It's an exciting time for us at OSI and for the Appalachian region, I think. Um, just some quick Zoom tips for tools that we have at our use here. Because of the high volume of participants we have today, we're unable to do a verbal Q&A or verbal chat session, but we would love to hear from you in our Q&A section, which you will find the Q&A box at the bottom or top of your screen, however that's formatted on your end. Please, anytime you have a question that pops up for you, make sure you put that into the Q&A box, and we will hold on to those questions. We'll have a couple of small breaks throughout the presentation today, and then we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. Um, and we'll do our best to get to every single question as efficiently as possible. If you have any questions aside from that or any, thoughts that might pop up, feel free to chat a presenter or a panelist through the chat function as well. And at this point, unless anybody has questions now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nick Richardson.
Great. Thanks, Jazz. And I just want to make sure folks can see slides okay. Those are sort of coming through. If we have those.
Give me 1 second.
Great. Okay, great. I'm seeing them now too. So I think that gets us into good shape to start. We are going to get started. It's a big presentation today, and we do want to save time for folks' questions and discussion towards the end. My name is Nick Richardson. I'm the Senior Vice President for Capital Strategies at the Open Space Institute, and it's my incredible pleasure to welcome you all today. I know we can't all see each other in this format. That's part of what the chat request was about, so get a sense of who's here. But just to build on that a little bit, as of yesterday, we had over 200 people signed up for this webinar from across 18 states. And that's a great mix of folks that we've worked with in the past at OSI who've participated in previous initiatives and funds that we've had, and people and organizations that are new to us. And so we're really glad that you're all here. And really just want to start this presentation by thanking you from the bottom of our hearts for the work that you do. It's really incredible what you're doing and what we're all doing together in this landscape. And we're going to have some time today to talk more about and share some of the ways in which we think about the value of that landscape and how that drives the work that we do and the setup and design for this next phase of our work, the Appalachian Landscapes Project. Then we're going to share some specifics about each of the grant opportunities that are coming online and available now. And we'll wrap up with some information about how to apply and what the project selection process will look like. And we hope that that'll be comprehensive and give you all the answers that you need. But we are, as I said, saving a bunch of time at the end for questions and answers. And of course, we'll give you a sense of how you can follow up with us throughout the process to make sure that you're getting the information that you need to apply. Next slide. So this is just giving you a bit of an overview and history here of the grant making work that OSI has done in the Appalachians, which has been a combination of direct capital granting and investing in projects that are done by land trust organizations throughout the Appalachians through a series of funds. We started doing that work in the early 2000s, and since then we've helped to direct over $78 million of funding into the landscape. We're really excited to be launching in this stage of our work, and we'll talk more about this throughout the presentation, an approach and a funding round that's available across the entire 18-state Appalachian region. That's the first time that we've done that and had the ability to do that. And so we're really excited to have that opportunity. And we're inspired by all of you and all of the many groups that are working to conserve land here. I feel a sense of clarity and urgency together about the need for a connected, protected, and resilient Appalachians region. I also want to shout out here and take a moment to emphasize the work that we do to support planning and capacity building work through our Catalyst Grants program. And this is an extraordinary effort that OSI has been involved in, partnered with the Land Trust Alliance and others through the years to fund organizations to build conservation plans, to incorporate climate resilience science into their strategic planning, to develop particular kinds of technical abilities and capacity so that they can further their conservation missions overall. And the map on the right shows the areas of work, the geographic zones for organizations that have worked with us through that Catalyst program. And you can see it really maps very well in this region to the geography and the goals of the capital grant program as well. Next slide. And we're going to take a moment here just to kind of zoom back out and think about the landscape overall and why for the work that we're doing, for the work that you're doing, and the Appalachian Landscapes Project overall. I think for many of us that are on the webinar today who are here, this will sound familiar and is probably very consistent with what drives you and your work and your approach to conservation in your region. But one of the major points for us, that one of the factors that really drives our work across the Appalachians is just the sort of singular value of this landscape. And I think that the science and research is really backing that up now, that the Appalachians are a really critical global resource for carbon storage, for biodiversity, for climate resilience, for habitat. It's this place that we all happen to be in, but it is also a globally important resource as the planet and humanity face some really incredible challenges around climate and other changes. And so, it's when we look at that landscape, we really think about emphasizing and building approaches that protect that resilience, that continue to sort of support and secure and store that carbon storage in forests, and to make sure that many more people directly benefit from, shape, and are part of the conservation work in their communities. That this is really essential to our movement and its long-term success, and to building support for all of the work that we do across the region. I also want to take a moment here to acknowledge the many funding partners that are joining with us in this next phase of our work. We're really deeply grateful to them for their partnership. It's going to be a 7-year effort for OSI, this next phase, and we're going to be actively fundraising throughout that entire period to support and further these goals. And more information about our funders is available on our website and the component of OSI's website for the Appalachian Landscapes Project. I also want to mention a really wonderful advisory committee that has been put together to help guide this work. Again, more information about that committee is available on our website, and it's more information about its members and the roles that they're going to play. And we really just want to take a moment to thank each of them for the commitment they're making and their contribution to this work. Next slide, Jess. Yeah. So when I talked about the overall goals for the Appalachian Landscapes Project, they're pretty broad and they encompass direct land protection, but also working at a broader level to influence what's happening in the region and to help to promote and protect resilience and community benefits of land all across the region through a variety of approaches and tools. And so we wanted to share just a little bit about those tools, the tools that OSI is looking to deploy in the region, which is a combination of the capital and catalyst grant work that is the emphasis and focus of the presentation today. But it really extends beyond that too in the various roles that we play, providing technical assistance support to the field, driving conversations and work around data and science that can inform field-wide goals and help to guide decision making at a variety of scales to amplify the impacts of many different entities that are working across the region. And we'll be talking more about that and showing you some of those specific tools in a moment. And just really want to call out and appreciate the work that's done at OSI and in many partner organizations to emphasize science, to build tools that help to guide conservation work with climate and resilience in mind. And we're also really focusing in our work as a land trust in various regions on community engagement and community facilitated and driven conservation. How can we put the local communities in the driver's seat around thinking about land use, and the role that it has in determining a vibrant future for them going forward. And we know many of you are also working at the frontier of this and just really appreciate the effort and energy that's going in this direction today. Next slide. So I just talked a little bit about some of the mapping resources and tools that we have been working on, trying to apply and make available the data and science that supports climate resilience, carbon storage, and human flourishing across this landscape. And OSI is really pleased to announce the launch of a new mapping resource center that combines a lot of these data sets and information into, I think, a really useful, user-friendly, accessible tool. That's my view on it. We'd love to have more of you use it and give us your feedback on how it works. But we're really pleased to be able to bring together a lot of interesting information and we think really useful and valuable information to inform conservation planning in one place so that you can have access to that and use it to help develop your conservation plans and to look at and evaluate and prioritize projects. This tool also has a specific application for the fall grant round, and in particular for the capital grants section, where we're going to be asking applicants to use the Mapping Resource Center to evaluate their projects and help to develop some and look at some criteria that are important for the application round. And we're going to be talking more about this later too. None of this work happens without a really great team of people. So going to the next slide, Jazz. I just wanted to take a moment to call out the great folks that work on our capital strategies team and in our science and planning group that are sort of most directly going to be your points of contact for these grant programs. These include Joel Hauser in Tennessee, who's coming to us from Tennessee, our grants director there, Bill Rollick, our person in the Mid-Atlantic, and Sarah Wells, our New England program manager. She's based in Massachusetts. Many of you will have already had contact and involvement with these folks, and I'm really glad that they're on our team and available to help answer your questions and be your point of contact as this grant round unfolds. Holly Schwab is going to be leading our Catalyst Grant program, and particularly in terms of the fall grant round, will be the main point of contact and Aisha Rodriguez will be working with her and backing her up on that program as it rolls out this fall. And you've already met Jazz Unal Rodriguez, who manages everything on our team and helps to make sure our whole effort runs smoothly. And Jazz is also available to answer questions and help to steer you to the right person if you have questions about that. Next slide.
Great. Thanks, Nick, and good afternoon, all. Again, my name is Hallie Schwab, and I'd like to provide just a brief overview of the Appalachian Landscapes Project Catalyst program, which has a goal of supporting climate-informed planning to accelerate the pace of land protection and stewardship across the Appalachian region. Catalyst grants support planning, as I said, which can encompass a broad range of activities that contribute to the development of conservation strategy or decision making. So that can take a lot of forms, but that might include priority setting, mapping, needs assessment, convening partners, community engagement, or a broad set of work to develop the policies or procedures that will guide implementation of conservation activities. Catalyst grants can also set the stage for future capital grant proposals through the Appalachian Landscapes Project or other funding sources, but really affording groups the time and space to clarify priorities and actionable strategies. So in terms of project types, projects can take a variety of forms, but should result in one or more of the following deliverables: climate-informed conservation plans that identify priorities for land protection, climate-informed stewardship plans that develop strategies for climate-smart land management that promotes resilience or carbon storage and sequestration, or community resilience plans that advance nature-based strategies to strengthen climate resilience within a specific community. It's important to note that all projects should address priorities at a broad scale, such as a community, county, watershed, or corridor. So if you've received Catalyst funding from OSI in the past, this is an important change, and just underscoring that we're no longer funding planning projects focused on a single property. Land trusts, nonprofits, tribal entities, municipalities are all eligible to apply. And we also encourage proposals from networks or collaboratives of multiple organizations. So if you're applying as a collaborative or a partnership, we just ask that one of the members that meets the eligibility criteria submit the proposal on behalf of the group. Next slide, please. So in this first round, we have up to $150,000 available to award across the Appalachian region. You can request up to $20,000 in your proposal, and there's no match requirement. Again, grants should support costs associated with planning, so that can include your staff time, consultants, travel, stipends for partners or community members, and indirect cost up to 15% of the total budget. Please note that Catalyst grants can't be used for plan implementation or general operating support, direct land protection, or general organizational planning. Next slide, please. And just a brief rundown of the criteria that will be used to evaluate all Catalyst proposals. We are looking to fund projects that are catalytic in nature, and we'll look to you to tell us how this planning will spur impacts, beyond the life of the project. And this could take a variety of forms. For example, leveraging additional funding, growing the skills and relationships needed to work effectively, building a pipeline of projects for implementation, cultivating the conditions needed to achieve conservation impacts, or developing replicable models. There needs to be a clearly defined audience for the plan that has the capacity to implement, and it should be clear that the proposal is feasible and likely to succeed within 12 to 18 months. The proposal should clearly describe the science, methods, and information sources that will inform the planning process. OSI doesn't prescribe the use of specific climate data or approaches, but we have compiled a robust set of resources available through the Mapping Resource Center that Nick pointed to earlier. And that's just a great reference as you're developing your proposal, as you're implementing your project. Finally, we'll be looking for projects that meaningfully involve community members and are designed to benefit people experiencing climate impacts. So I'll pause here to see if there's any clarifying questions before we move on.
Nothing yet at the moment.
And there'll be time throughout the presentation for more questions. So.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna give it one more minute here in case somebody does want to ask a question. Looks like one just came in to the Q&A box, so thanks for getting us started, anonymous attendee. And I think the question is about reiterating the eligibility of projects, eligibility of projects. So if this question, I think this question is about capital grants. If it is, we're about to move into talking about what will determine eligibility for capital grants. So that section is coming. And Hallie, if you want to just do a quick review on eligibility for catalyst grants, that would be great.
Sure. And Jasmine, could you go back a couple of slides? Maybe we can bring that up again. Um, in terms of eligible entities, go one more, please. Could you go back one more slide? Eligible entities will be accepting proposals from land trusts, nonprofits, tribal governments, and municipalities. These are the project types again, so several different types of planning. And if you go to the next slide, we'll just show again, funds should be expended towards the development of a plan or strategy, but there's sort of broad, funds can be used to cover your staff time to develop the plan, if you're working with consultants, if you're working with other partners to cover their time. So hope that helps to answer the question, but please feel free to follow up.
There are
Hallie,
questions also. There was a follow-up from Anonymous again. To clarify, can you reiterate what you said around single properties versus larger properties? And
Yes.
academic institutions eligible to apply either as government entity or via their nonprofit foundations.
Great, thank you, Jasmine. So I think the first question has to do with planning at scale. So in the past, we've funded planning, at the scale of a single property. And what we're saying is we're asking all proposals now to address a larger land area. So that could be multiple properties. It could be, a community or county scale. It could be a larger focus area or service area. So if you have any specific questions as you're developing a proposal about whether it's a good fit, I'd be very happy to connect one-on-one and just chat. The question is about the next question was about academic institutions, and I would say academic institutions could definitely apply through sort of the nonprofit foundation, or if you qualify as a government entity, that's another route. Again, if you have sort of specific cases that don't line up well with the entities we've described here, please do reach out.
The next question we have is from Simon. For proposals for this round that are not selected for funding, will you keep these on file and consider them for potential funding in the next funding round?
so
Uh, oh, go ahead.
I think this question might apply to both the Catalyst and the capital rounds. So, Hallie, do you want to take it for Catalyst? Then maybe Joel, I'd ask you to jump in for capital.
Sure. I think I would say, in general, if it's a strong proposal and we don't have the funding to advance all projects that are a really good fit, we might be in touch and encourage you to apply again. I would say, as a general practice, we don't carry proposals over from round to round. I think there are certain cases, and maybe Joel can expand on this, but I think there's certain cases where a project could be deferred. And I think that would be the situation where we would say, we don't think this project is quite ready for funding this round, but we will, if you can address these considerations, we would look at it in a future grant round. So I think that's more rare for Catalyst grants, but it could happen. But I'll hand it over to Joel to address that for capital.
Yeah, hi everybody. There with the capital grants, there are going to be kind of four outcomes that are possible from the evaluation and grant decisions. That's going to be kind of an approval. It might be an approval at a lower amount, depending on funds. It could be a decline, or as Hallie said, a deferral. The way we typically handle it in the capital on the capital side of things is that the next round or well, the deferral letter will kind of explain why the project is deferred. And usually what that means is that, this is a great project that's worthy of funding, except these couple of factors. And so that could be project readiness, that could be kind of outstanding questions around stewardship, et cetera. And we try to work very closely with applicants on deferred projects so that they can bring them back forward with minimal effort. And so that minimal effort usually looks like a memo that addresses the things that we highlighted at the time of the initial grant decision. We do ask that if a project is declined, not to bring it back forward. That's a final answer. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. But we do endeavor to work with you all to get as many good projects funded as possible.
Thanks so much, Joel. There are a number of questions coming into the chat to the Q&A, which is great. I want to take just a couple more, and then if they continue to come in, we'll try to answer them by chat. We'll kind of write answers back, and if people can monitor there, that's great. And then if there are questions or along a theme that keep coming up, we will certainly come back to that in the Q&A section at the end. There's one here I'll take from an anonymous attendee, just confirming that this grant opportunity is expected to be recurring each year for the next 7 years. Yes, the sort of life of this program, as we've defined it, is 7 years at this point, and we do plan to offer both of these grant rounds as part of that. And we'll talk more about the shape of that and our plans around that in the rest of the presentation. There's another one here. Is advocacy work towards policy and budget allocations eligible? Would the Catalyst program fund sort of policy-related work? And then there's a related one, is statewide and acceptable geography. So maybe just taking that, Hallie, would a statewide policy advocacy plan be eligible under Catalyst?
Well, and I'll address them maybe separately in case they aren't connected. First I'll say that a statewide geography is fine for planning efforts at a statewide scale. In terms of eligible and ineligible costs, we aren't able to fund political lobbying or advocacy work, although some types of policy work, planning around policy could be eligible. So again, if this is sort of an area that you're thinking about, I'd encourage you to reach out because certainly, I think some policy work could fall into that bucket of helping to foster the enabling conditions for successful land protection, but we aren't able to fund political lobbying or certain types of advocacy work.
Thanks so much, Hallie. And there's just one more here around, is this focusing on a single organization or funding to fund partnerships, collaboratives? Are they eligible or both eligible? And I would assume the answer is yes, right? That we would love to fund partnerships.
Both are eligible. So it's fine for a single organization working at scale to submit a proposal. And we also encourage proposals from partnerships or collaboratives. And I'll just, Nick, if I could respond to one other question I see here about an organizational capacity building plan. Yeah, I think that could be eligible. But again, I'd encourage you to reach out just to make sure that it's well aligned. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for diving in with the questions. We really appreciate it and love that we're getting a conversation started here. I am going to hand it from here to Bill Rollick, who's going to talk through the eligibility and criteria and goals for the capital grant program. So, Bill, over to you.
Thanks, Nick, and hi, everyone. I'm Bill Rawlick. I oversee the capital grants for OSI in the Mid-Atlantic and primarily in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And I'm going to give an overview of the capital grant program. So the capital grant program has been designed to help us meet the goals Nick talked about earlier through protection that exemplifies these priorities and goals. And the capital funding specifically supports permanent land protection through the purchase of land or conservation easements. And as with the Catalyst Fund, we can talk about eligibility. Um, the eligibility for the capital grant fund includes land trusts and other nonprofits with a conservation related mission, as well as tribal governments, municipalities, and other government entities. So it's pretty broad. Land trust applicants need to have adopted Land Trust Alliance standards and practices. The LTA accreditation, however, is encouraged but not mandatory. All applicants need to demonstrate their ability to handle and complete a real estate transaction and have the capacity and to complete the deal and steward the land uh, afterward, or ensure that it's passed to somebody that can steward the land properly. If another entity is going to be the long-term steward, we'll be relying on the applicant to provide information that shows that the third entity knows and will follow the goals of this grant fund and has the capacity to steward the land over time in keeping with these goals. So long-term stewardship is very important. Later in the presentation, Joel will share how we will evaluate applications, but we ask that potential applicants reach out to the OSI field staff in their specific region prior to applying. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about funding availability. In this first round, we have up to 4.6 million available for capital grants across the entire Appalachian region. But there are some important things to keep in mind about how these funds are allocated geographically. Of the total 4.6 million, there's a little less than $1 million that could be spent anywhere within the Appalachian boundary that we've drawn in our screening tool mapping, which is linked in our website. So you can bring up that big boundary, that encompasses the entire Appalachians and see if your project falls inside that line or outside. The rest of the funding beyond that 1 million that can go anywhere is about 3.7 million, and it's dedicated to the three geographies where OSI has historically been active with different amounts for each region. As you can see on the map, the darkest green covers the southern Appalachians, where we have up to 2.7 million to deploy just in that region. And we have up to 500,000 to award in each of the other two regions further north that we've shaded a little lighter. Because of these limitations, we're expecting that the grant award sizes outside the Southern Appalachians will be in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, but could exceed that in cases where the applications are of very high quality. So I would say don't hesitate to share any application with us, because sometimes we can be creative, and also the awards can vary. This is a building year. We're just getting started with the new Appalachian Landscape Project. This round kicks off what we're planning to be a 7-year effort. The size of the grants and our funding capacity will change and hopefully grow over the coming years. Okay, next slide. Okay. We like to see a 4-to-1 match when possible, meaning that OSI is funding 20% of the overall eligible project costs. That means that the applicant will bring in $4 of match funds for every OSI grant dollar. The total eligible project cost, which is an important term, typically includes the full appraised value of the project plus transaction costs. So the match is against that aggregate value, not just the value of the project. We have some flexibility that's spelled out in the grant package, and we're open to discussing further with applicants on a case-by-case basis. um, where need is demonstrated. In addition to direct financial match, the value of other land that the organization has protected within the last 2 years can count as match. And that could be really significant, and that can actually make a project where, the funding isn't available viable. And the match property must meet the criteria of the Appalachian Landscape Project and be adjacent or near the subject property, the initial property you're applying for. If you plan to use the property as match, please note that we'll need to see an appraisal to substantiate the value, and additional guidance to match properties about match properties is in our grant package. Next slide. So, to reiterate, what can a capital grant be used for? Capital grants, again, must be used only for protection of land through fee simple acquisition or easements. We disperse capital grant funds at closing. Our preference is to wire funds directly to a closing. In limited cases, we are also able to consider funding transaction and due diligence costs through reimbursements. In rare cases, we can reimburse grantees post-closing for an entire project as well. But in other words, you close it on your own and then we reimburse you later. But we really need to review all your closing materials. So in those cases, we still must review and approve all closing and due diligence documents prior to the closing. Once again, you can close on your own in rare cases. We really prefer to wire the money at closing, but in those cases, we still need to review all the documents ahead of the closing. And, to understand this better, please contact your regional land manager to discuss, like Joel, Sarah, and I before applying. Capital grants cannot be used to cover staff time or stewardship costs at this time, though we recognize the importance of doing that. We encourage everyone to read the scoring guidance in the grant package very carefully and to be realistic about whether a project is aligned with the goals of the grant and can close within 18 months. If it's not ready, we recommend waiting to apply. What does ready mean? Well, generally, it means that you've completed negotiations and have an agreed upon price and have a signed contract and can demonstrate that you'll soon have all the funding sources and match funding committed, or it's highly likely that your match funding and other funding will be in place by closing. So with that, I'll let Joel dive into the scoring and evaluation in more detail. Next slide.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill, and hi everybody. Just to kind of echo Nick, we're really excited about the interest in the grant fund and want to make it as transparent as possible. And echoing Bill, we're really happy to work with you kind of pre-application or post to see where we can be helpful. Our intention through the fund is to support a set of exemplary projects that contribute to climate resilience for people and wildlife. Our evaluation process is twofold. As Bill mentioned, we're going to apply a new scoring system this round that's tied to 5 project quality criteria. The scoring guidance is spelled out in the grant package, so please do review that to see how your project will score. It's a 100-point system, and we've mapped out what we'll be evaluating when allocating these points across the 5 scoring categories. An important note, we don't expect all projects to excel in all categories. And so we have 100 points, but your project might be a great project that doesn't score an A. And that's okay. This is a way for us to compare projects throughout such a large geography. If you have questions about how your projects, about your project and how it might score, please reach out to the OSI field staff that services your geography. The Well, we will also consider aspects of proposed projects that aren't scored. And so this is important. Readiness, as Bill mentioned, we will also evaluate whether the applicant has the capacity to protect, so acquire either the fee or easement, as well as steward the land. We will evaluate if the project budget makes sense. If the fundraising plan for outstanding funding is doable in the proposed timeline, and does the structure of the transaction actually, lead to protection of the property? So staff will consider all the scored and non-scored aspects of the proposed projects when making recommendations to our external advisory committee. And I'm going to dive a bit deeper into the science we're considering for project evaluations. And the first thing to jump into is a new term to all of you all, which is the functional ecological network. Next slide. The functional ecological network is new. The primary building block of the network is resilience, which most folks are familiar with at this point. In case it's a less familiar concept, the Nature Conservancy has done extensive modeling and mapping to identify the places with the most potential for plants and animals to adapt and persist as the climate changes. And so these resilient sites that are identified through that are well connected, and they provide the diverse microclimates needed for plants and animals to migrate and adapt into the future. Part of the terrestrial resilience data suite that we pull out are geophysical settings, which are a combination of geology types and elevation. These geophysical settings are a driver of the presence of species and microclimates. Certain geophysical settings, such as those associated with calcareous soils and loam soils, are highly correlated with high biodiversity. Next slide. It's become clear that the conservation field has done a really great job of protecting certain geophysical settings, especially rocky and higher elevation places. On the whole, we've made much less progress protecting other types of settings, like the low elevation limestone that's so closely correlated with biodiversity. Lower elevation places with fertile soils tend to be the most attractive for agriculture and development, so this trend makes sense. There's very high pressure on some of these settings. And they're also some of the last remaining habitat types for certain rare and endemic species. This creates a sense of urgency and responsibility to prioritize the conservation of these underrepresented and resilient places if we're really aiming to sustain biodiversity in the face of climate change, continued development, and resource extraction. OSI has compiled and organized these resources, the resilience geophysical settings, and other robust resources in the Appalachian Landscapes Mapping Resource Center that Nick mentioned. And this draws on the leading work of Mark Anderson's team at the Nature Conservancy, and we really appreciate their leadership in developing these core data sets. And we're trying to answer the core question, what will it actually take to have a connected, protected, and resilient Appalachian landscape? And this is a great step in that direction. The functional ecological network offers a vision that emphasizes protecting resilient lands with special attention to lands atop the geophysical settings that are currently less than 15% protected and also at high risk of conversion. So we're really honing in on the threatened landscapes. This vision is for the entire eastern United States, but ecological connectivity in the Appalachians is striking, and thus the focus for this grant program. I also, I often think of it as our best chance for maintaining biodiversity into the future. As I mentioned, we've housed the functional ecological network data within the Appalachian Landscapes Mapping Resource Center, linked in the grant materials. There's also a great story map to explore, and the data are available in an interactive map format as well, and shown in a specific format that should help applicants as they plan for capital grant proposals. If you have any trouble accessing the data, trouble interpreting the data, please contact your OSI field staff. We're also offering a webinar for the broader conservation field on November 5th to explore the science and our new tools in depth. Please watch your emails for information about that webinar. Of the 5 project quality criteria we're scoring, the contribution to the functional ecological network is weighted most heavily. The primary building block is resilience, and in keeping with the vision described, we're also awarding additional points if the property is both resilient and contains some of those underrepresented geophysical settings. If your project area doesn't have any mapped resilience, your project is likely to not be competitive unless it's truly exceptional in other categories. So this is a good litmus for whether or not to apply, but please do reach out to your field staff. Also note that if you think that the functional ecological network isn't adequately capturing the biodiversity importance and value of your project, there's a spot in the application for you to tell us that and to offer other information for consideration. As always, this is modeled data and there is room for error, and we invite your in-depth knowledge on the projects. That knowledge and familiarity that you all bring is really an important element for our consideration of the property's overall biodiversity value, but also the other elements that we will consider. Within the Appalachian Landscapes Mapping Resource Center, there's a tab called ALP Grants that you'll navigate to. If you go there and scroll down, you'll see an interactive map that shows the data layers that are involved in scoring. You can zoom in on this tool, even add a shapefile. It's important to note that applicants won't be asked to do any of the calculations referenced in the scoring guidance, although you're welcome to. We'll handle all of that this round using the shapefile you upload with your application. So please do make sure that your shapefiles that you upload are as accurate as possible. Here, if you're in the ALP Grants tab, you can see the functional ecological network is turned on in the legend. We've drawn a red box around the components that include the above average resilience. Basically, if your project is primarily mapped in any of these colors that are squared, you're probably in good shape for the functional functional ecological network contribution words. Next slide. So if your property has these values, you'll get a boost in the scoring. We strongly recommend people spend time with this tool and reach out if you'd like assistance. We won't be discussing the freshwater aspect in any detail today, but invite you to attend our science-focused webinar in November. The second largest category in our scoring is community conservation. Recognizing that we'll not be successful in protecting land for nature if we don't consider community needs and wants as well. We've drafted new guidance which can be found in the grant package. We're specifically interested in supporting projects that have local tangible benefits, preferably resulting from genuine community input. We appreciate that conservation can offer many broad public benefits, but this is part of the application. This part of the application is a place to go deeper. We'll give points to projects with specific benefits that address specific community needs, ideally with evidence that the community itself was involved in naming those needs. We're also amplifying the importance of designing projects that benefit people who have historically not had access to the benefits of conservation or who have been negatively impacted by it. Important to note, this may not apply to every project, and please don't force an answer here. Again, we don't expect every project to excel in every category. As Nick mentioned at the top, a primary goal of the Appalachian Landscapes Project is keeping forests as forests and ensuring that high carbon forests are managed over time to retain or increase their carbon storage and sequestration. On the data side, we're relying on Clark University's projections. These are based on no-cut scenarios for 2050, and these they don't reflect actual management plans, but they're still a useful measure to consider. Future management could either help or hinder a forest's abilities to store and sequester carbon, and so the stewardship and management of that forest carbon is important. The scoring here is preferential to places with higher than average projected carbon storage. In the map, the darker green, the better for scoring. Again, this is in the ALP Grants tab of the Mapping Resource Center. Note that projects protecting other natural habitat types are also eligible for funding other than forests, but they're unlikely to score well in the forest carbon category. If you're interested, we'll be covering this as well in our November webinar in greater detail, and you're noticing a theme here. The third category is threat, opportunity, and stewardship. We have updated our stewardship and conservation easement guidance, which is included in the grant package. Here, we're looking to understand the context of the project, the level of threat, and the likelihood of negative impacts to the land if the property isn't protected. Also, if the project has the potential to have a specific catalytic impact based on where it is or who you're working with, we would like to hear about that as well. Almost half of the points in this category are tied to long-term stewardship capacity and strategy. As Bill alluded to earlier, this becomes particularly important if there's an additional entity proposed to be involved in the project. For example, if a land trust is seeking funds to acquire a property that it plans to then convey to a state agency, we want to understand and evaluate how the state's long-term stewardship strategy will remain aligned with the goals of this grant fund. Ultimately, we want to understand how the ecological and community values being proposed for protection will be thoughtfully taken care of over time. Finally, we have the overall project quality criteria, which is 10% of the score. This is a more subjective area of the evaluation, recognizing that our scoring methodology is going to be imperfect. As reviewers will use our discretion in awarding these points. Among other things, we'll be thinking about the strength of the intended impacts of the project and other intangible project qualities that you bring to our attention. With that, we will move into questions. And then Sarah will share more information about the application and implementation process.
Thanks so much, Joel, and appreciate everybody's questions that are coming into the Q&A box. A lot of them have to do with the eligibility of specific geographies or project types. In the interest of time, I'm wondering if we can, if our team can tackle those via chat. And then if there are any that are outstanding, we can come back to them when we finish the presentation in the Q&A section. But yeah, a lot of kind of specific questions related to what's in and what's out on the map that we could, I think, work through, and project types. And full credit where credit is due, the slide with very cute children that we showed for the community conservation discussion are Kate Waters' kids. Kate is on the webinar today, and just let us know that. So yeah, there you go. Kate's kids doing their part in our presentation today. Thanks, Kate. And yeah, I think with that, let's keep moving here. I'm going to pass it to you, Sarah, to take us through this next section.
Thanks, Nick, and that's a fun surprise about those very cute kids. Hey, everyone. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking through some of the application pointers and what you can expect if your project is selected for funding. First, I imagine many of you have already done this, but if you haven't, please do check out the grant package for whichever grant that you're considering. All of the guidance that we've talked about today and the full text of the application itself is in the grant package to help you plan your proposal. Next slide. So both grant packages will direct you pretty quickly to the screening tool, which again is at the top of the ALP grants tab in the Mapping Resource Center. You can zoom in, you can type in an address using that little magnifying glass that's in the upper left-hand corner, and you can even add a shapefile directly. So first step, please make sure that you are within this funding boundary. Next slide. And like Joel said, if you are considering a capital grant application, we highly recommend that you keep scrolling further down on that ALP grants tab so that you can play with that interactive map and really get a solid sense of how your project fares against the spatial data elements of the scoring guidance that Joel just talked about. And please keep in mind here that this scoring only applies to the property for which you're seeking funding. We call that the subject parcel, and that's especially relevant if you're proposing to use other property as match. We definitely care about where that match property is and how it contributes to the overall conservation context, but we aren't going to be scoring those match properties. Okay, so if you do plan to apply, you'll ultimately do that through OSI's grants database. It's called Foundant. If your organization doesn't already have an account, you will need to set one up. It's free. It's pretty quick and easy to do. If your organization does already have an account, but you need help accessing it, or maybe you need to update the staff contacts, then if you need help, again, you can just reach out to Jasmine. And I know that these online platforms can sometimes be a little intimidating, at least they are for me, but hopefully some reassurance about Foundant. It automatically saves your work every 100 characters as you type and every time you click out of a question. And you can also click save. There's a save button that you can click at any time. And that being said, it's still probably going to be helpful for you to have all of your narrative responses typed up and saved in a separate Word document, so you can just copy and paste it over into Foundant. We've tried to be pretty generous with the character counts, but we would deeply appreciate any effort to keep your responses as short and straightforward as possible. And beyond the narrative portion, you'll also be asked to upload a few things to support your application. Each grant has its own budget template. They're both viewable and downloadable from our website, so you can look at those ahead of time. For Catalyst, we'll need a map or some other visual that shows the general planning project area. And for Capital, like Joel has said, we'll need the actual shapefile. There are a few other uploads that might be applicable. So if you are proposing to use other property as match, we'll need that shapefile. If you indicated that your project is part of a broader conservation plan, we'll want a simple map of that effort too. And we don't need shapefile level detail there, and you won't be judged on the prettiness of the map. We really just need enough information to understand how your proposal fits within that broader context. I know we've said this a lot, but if you need any help, especially with the mapping pieces, then please do reach out. We'd be happy to help you. We really don't want anyone getting tripped up with the mapping. And finally here, if your proposal is strong on the community benefits piece, you're welcome to submit letters of support from your community partners. This is really a way to amplify their voices and help us understand the community needs that your project is addressing. And I want to be really clear here, we're not looking for general letters of support, as lovely and accurate as they may be. Okay, going to touch on timing now. Start with Capital. We're accepting applications through Friday, December 5th, aiming to share out decisions in February. From there, we're looking for projects to close within 18 months, which puts us out to about August of 2027. If your project is selected for funding, you'll get a grant letter and a term sheet from OSI and a checklist of everything that we'll need to review ahead of wiring out the funding to the closing. And we're happy to do a Zoom call really early on with you and our legal team so we can go through that checklist together, talk through the specifics, any potential hurdles, and develop a plan for how we're going to communicate with each other over the course of the grant. Once all of that diligence is squared away, reviewed by our legal team, we'll draft a grant agreement and we'll work with your closing agent to wire the funds to the closing. This is a snapshot of what the due diligence review encompasses. It's a pretty straightforward list. Our goal here is not to complicate the process. We really just want to make sure that the transaction itself is sound. And want to emphasize here that if your project is selected for funding, we're invested in your success. So we really want to help you get that project across the finish line. The Catalyst grant follows a similar timing arc, but the funding goes out at the beginning of the grant period. And Hallie will check in with grantees partway through the planning process just to hear how things are going. That plan itself should be done within 12 to 18 months of getting the award. And once the plan is done, then we'll ask for a brief final written report so we can hear the outcome of the planning process and anything that you and your team learned along the way. And finally, I know we've said this so many times, but if you have questions at any point, please do reach out to us. We mean that. We want to be a resource. We genuinely appreciate the work that all of you do. Always happy to hear about potential projects. And I will make one, I can't even say it'll be the last plug, one more plug for the webinar we're doing on Wednesday, November 5th, for anyone interested in going deeper into the science and data behind our new Mapping Resource Center. And there will be a link to that, perfect timing, right there in the chat. Thank you, Julia. And now I will pass things back to Nick, and we will work through the great questions that people have been giving.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And just as we close up the presentation portion here, I just want to take a few minutes to really reflect on OSI's work and how it's evolving in the region. Our commitment, I think, which is really deepening over time. The Appalachian Landscapes Project involves a set of grant rounds, the capital and catalyst work, but it's a lot more than that too. And we're really thinking across all of OSI in the ways that we can be supporting and engaging in work that helps to achieve the goals that we've talked about today, that I know we all live and breathe, everybody on the call here, in terms of this region and how we're trying to protect it and help it continue to flourish for many, many decades and generations to come. So we're going to have more information rolling out about those different pieces as the rest of the year unfolds and as we move into 26. And the presentation on the Mapping Resource Center, which is coming up in a few weeks, is a really good indicator of that or example of that. And we really are excited to be launching that and hope folks will join on for that presentation and conversation as well. It's really a moment for us to think up a level together with you about what this region needs and how we can all be working together to accelerate conservation that really makes a difference across it. And excited to be in that conversation with you. So yeah, thanks everybody for making some time and joining us today. I really appreciate the chance to share this next capital grant program and catalyst program with you. We are really appreciative of your interest and your involvement, and we're going to take a moment here to go through the remaining questions that have been raised and any others that folks want to land in the Q&A section. And again, we have about a little bit less than half an hour left in the webinar time that's available to dig into those in detail. We also, if folks do decide to start to step off, we do a quick poll that we'd love to just open now and ask people to fill out. It just would take you a minute. And the information in that poll will be helpful for us in structuring and planning what we do next in terms of communication and engagement with you. And we'll reflect back some of the themes that we learned from it in our follow-up emails and the other follow-up that we have with you. So thanks so much for taking some time to share your feedback with us in that way. Okay, we're going to turn to questions here, and I have not I've not been back to the question box since I was there about half an hour ago. So I'll just be looking in here at what we have, and then starting to pull them out. There are some pretty specific ones around eligibility of particular areas. Kyle has a question here about the eligibility of the lower Neversink Valley, and whether that is part of the Mid-Atlantic focus area. Bill, I know you know Kyle well. Maybe you could just take that question quickly. It might be useful for others too.
The answer is yes. It's within the big boundary of the Appalachians, which is 157 million acres. So, Kyle, you're covered.
Is it within the focus area where the specific 500,000 is available, Bill? I think that's the
Yeah,
question.
yeah. It's
Yes.
you. It's going to be in either, I believe it's in the Mid-Atlantic, and it would be 500,000. And if it's covered in New England, it would be 500,000 as well. So I'll verify that for you, Kyle, and we'll make sure you get a clear answer. But it would be 500,000.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Um, I don't know, Gertie, if this question around the Joanna Weitzel's chatbot got answered appropriately. I don't know the answer, but in general, I try not to click on links unless I'm 100% sure that there's a person that I respect and like and trust on the other end. So I hope that worked out. Um, we have from Amy, would landowner outreach in priority areas fall within the catalyst funding category?
Yeah, great question. I think it gets to that distinction again between planning versus implementation. So I would say doing like the actual work of reaching out to landowners, if that's the full, uh, the full focus of the proposal, probably not a great fit. If you're developing a strategy to reach key folks in a priority area, that could be eligible. So again, I'd encourage you to be in touch about the specifics of what you're thinking and whether it's a good fit. But certainly we understand that talking to people is an important part of planning, but we should really emphasize the sort of development of strategy over actually doing the work.
Thanks so much, Hallie. There's a question here that's got a number of thumbs up related to the timeline on the review process if a project is awarded, and specifically curious about how long it usually takes to move through the due diligence and to put the due diligence indeed through OSI review. So, Joel, maybe could you talk a little bit about the timeline and process there?
Yeah, so we do. There are a couple of questions in here. So the timeline of the review process, applications, we review those as a staff. That takes some time, and you will likely hear from field staff during that review process, as we're getting things together, and then we have our advisory committee meeting. I think we're hoping December 5th deadlines, and I think we're hoping end of January. I'm looking at you, Sarah. Of announcements. That's tight with holidays in there. Is that right?
End of January. I love it. I think ideally or more realistically, it'll probably be February.
Yeah. Then when projects are approved, our legal staff does review the specific project documents, and so that's your survey, draft deeds, title reports. Usually we like to have as much time as possible, in the neighborhood of 2 months to review those. But in particular, we need time with title because often there's exceptions we need to worry about, and so forth. So, if it's a complicated project, we need the full 2 months. We like to move more quickly than that. And I see a question in the chat, are surveys always required? Usually they are, and for a good legal description, but there's a number of projects or properties that actually have reasonable recent surveys where they wouldn't necessarily be required. But I like to always plan on doing that as part of a project.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yeah, please.
One thing that might be different from how other funders handle the review of diligence is that our legal team isn't expecting to get one package 2 months before closing that has everything completely finalized. We'd much rather work with folks throughout the process and get drafts as they're available so we can understand what might be an issue, what's not an issue. So that speaks to the importance of the ongoing communication so that we're kind of a partner throughout and we're not in the position where you're waiting on us. So it's a mutual communication pathway.
Great addition. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, you guys. There's another question here kind of related around the legal interest that we would have either in the CE or the fee or deed. Is there anything like that for OSI based on these grants?
No.
No, not something we're going to need. There's a question here about can an organization submit two capital proposals, or is it two or more? And another questioner had also asked a question related to this earlier. Joel?
Yeah, we don't limit the number of applications an applicant can put in. There are, of course, like constraints on how much funding we have and what we'll be able to fund, but we are happy to review multiple projects from the same organization. For the sake of your interest, I mean, I would reach out to the field staff to gauge which ones of those are kind of most likely to be successful. We definitely don't want people submitting applications for projects that are unlikely to be funded.
Thanks so much, Joel. I want to come back to project funding in a second. But before we do, Lee Dassler has a question related to Sebago. Sarah, I imagine you and Lee know each other. The question here is, we have a municipality that does not have digitized parcel data. Could the town or any of conservation partners apply for a Catalyst grant to undertake that service for the benefit of all? So Hallie, I don't know, what your take with that would be.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one. I mean, I think again, it's the intent of the Catalyst grants to help address, what might be obstacles or conditions that are needed for successful conservation outcomes. So I think that potentially could be a portion of a proposal. But please let's have a follow-up conversation about it. I'm interested in understanding kind of like the scope of the need and how that might fit into a Catalyst proposal. Certainly again, the focus is on planning, but some of that, like, technical work that might help facilitate the conditions for conservation could fall within that eligible activity. So,
Great. Thanks, Hallie. And then there's a question that's just come in from Caitlin Deo, I think. I hope I'm pronouncing that close to right. About the size of the parcel. Would a smaller 100 to 200 acre forest project that ranks highly in the and still rank well against projects that are considerably larger?
Yeah, I'll take that. So this is one of the challenges that we have been looking at in developing this program that spans such a geography. And so through the scoring, we have tried to make it so that smaller parcels, with specific impacts and specific benefits are actually competitive against much larger properties. Specifically, a lot of the places with the smaller parcels, are more threatened. They're closer to people. There's more opportunities for benefit there. And so, if every aspect were the same, the larger property would probably be more appealing. But the nature of where the smaller parcels are and what those landscapes look like, we've tried to make those projects competitive with each other.
Yeah, and Abby Weinberg's here with us, and it leads the science and planning, this part of the science and planning work for OSI, and really helped to develop the mapping and tools related to the FEN. And Abby, I'm wondering if you just would have any particular perspective or take on this question, if there are, specific either underrepresented settings or other sort of geographic types that you think where you think a small parcel might do particularly well?
This is a real challenge, as Joel said, around conservation, is that the large undeveloped forest areas, do tend to be further away from human populations, and then these underrepresented settings are underrepresented for a reason. So I think we are taking seriously the challenge of trying to protect these places, and we recognize they are going to be more expensive and smaller acreage. And so that's all I can say. We've definitely seen 30-acre limestone fens and really wrestled that are surrounded by development, a lot of biodiversity. And we do wrestle with those questions very actively. But yeah, I think we'd have to see the example to really be able to offer more.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in. The small parcels can be important for the connectivity as well. And in a dense place like the Mid-Atlantic, sometimes connecting some very important high-ranking regions with another parcel, that may have other attributes could be important.
Thanks so much, Bill and Abby. I wanted to just come back to, I know there are some other questions coming in, but I wanted to come back to funding for a second and maybe just to name something that I'm sure is in the room for everybody who's on with us. Um, we are really excited to have $4.6 million put out on the ground this year. It's one of the larger grant rounds that we've been able to run in recent years through OSI. And yet we know that it is a drop in the bucket uh, when you think about all of the great project work that's happening and the changes in the conservation landscape and in the federal landscape that are going to put tremendous pressure on funding. So we just want to acknowledge that. We're really aware of it. We know there'll be a lot of you looking to this resource, and that is both really inspiring and also, I think, a sign of the fact that there needs to be a lot more investment going into this kind of work. And part of what we hope to do through this grant round and through the Appalachian Landscapes Project overall is to create the conditions for more funding to flow into this work and particularly into this region so that we can keep moving things forward. But it's challenging times, and I just want to acknowledge that. And I think everybody here is working hard in a difficult context to get great work done. And yeah, we really appreciate that. And we know that's the backdrop of a period now where we're feeling pleased about being able to offer these resources and get this out to you all. And we know that there's so much more need out there that and opportunity out there that could be served from a fund and a program like this. So yeah, just wanted to acknowledge that. And we have a question here from Daniel Hester. In Maine, one way to support rural communities is to allow hunting and trapping. Is that a plus for the ALP?
Yeah, the hunting and trapping certainly is something that happens kind of a lot across the landscape, and we're comfortable with it. I don't know that it's something that adds tremendous value to the evaluation process, except if there are communities that do kind of expressly want more access for hunting and trapping.
Great, thanks, Joel. Anybody else want to add to that, or? Okay. I think that's the end of our questions or your questions, at least for now. Just to reiterate a couple of themes through today. Certainly get in touch with us. You have the contact information for all of our regional staff. We are all here and ready to connect with you, and it's probably the best way to go further in a conversation of exploring your project and whether it's a good fit. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send the link out for that recording to all of you and to everyone who is registered for the webinar in case they weren't able to make it. And yeah, we just really look forward to continuing to engage with you throughout the fall, uh, and uh, and working together to get some really great project work done this fall and into early 26 across this region. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. Really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you soon.
And I want to send a thank you to Julia. She's been dropping links into the chat for everybody. So hopefully you all have gotten those links and been able to click on them. Registration for the November 5th webinar on the Mapping Resource Center is also linked in the chat. And in our follow-up to you with the recording from this, we will make sure you get those links in that email as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Jazz. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.